Okay, good evening to another edition of What They Said, a podcast about movies that I started with Scott Woods and Stephen Rubio. We did a bunch of them. And last month, I think it was about a month ago, I was joined by an ILX friend, Jesse Fox Mayshark from Knoxville, Tennessee, to talk about the TV show Severance. And had a great time, thought it went really well. So tonight we're going to talk about um, at least at least one point of intersection. I'll call it a shared passion. I think we've probably parted ways since. The director Wes Anderson and his new film, The Phoenician Scheme. I got to check, Jesse, because I've been having all sorts of computer issues. Do I sound okay?
Yeah, it
Okay,
sounds
good.
great.
Because I have two options on the audio, and I went with the computer audio, so that's fine. Before we get into the film, though, Jesse, I thought you might want to, we could maybe take a couple of minutes to talk about your project, the podcast Headlights, Progressive South. I have listened to the first podcast, very much enjoyed it. I would like to be able to figure out a way to get it onto something I could listen to in the car, and I'm not sure if that's possible. I don't have a
Yeah,
cell.
I've had a request from a couple of friends asking about downloadable options. So yes, I'll need to look into that. I'm kind of learning everything about this as I go. Uh,
Okay, so
thanks for mentioning it.
yeah, sure. I'll just mention if you go to basically the main page, which is just the progressivesouth.org,
That's right.
there is a link at the top for podcasts. Is there anything you want to say about it? Other than,
Just, I mean, as the name of the website might suggest, it's a nonprofit media platform that I have started to try to amplify progressive voices and values in the American South, a place that actually has a lot of progressives. There are a lot of people here doing a lot of great work of all different kinds, but often tend to feel sort of isolated and marginalized as we are in a lot of ways. So yeah, the goal of this, I mean, I've kind of assigned myself the job of going all over the South talking to interesting people. So that's a fun job to have, and they've got about 8 episodes out, and have enjoyed talking to everybody from kind of grassroots community organizers to elected officials to people working in the arts. So anybody who has any interest in American politics, the American South, all of that, try to hit on a lot of different things.
yeah, the first installment I listened to spent a lot of time defining progressive and defining the South. And
Yeah,
it seemed to be about sort of combating assumptions about the South and politics. And as you say, it's not just it's solid mega territory by any means.
yeah.
Okay, so Wes Anderson, who has become a real problem for me. I started off as such a huge fan. Well, I always treat Rushmore as his first film. Of course, it wasn't. It was Bottle Rocket, which I saw after Rushmore. I think I liked it okay, but I still think of Rushmore as his first film. Certainly
Yeah, Rushmore is where he emerged for sure.
my introduction to him. I always like to mention that. I think it's the last film I ever saw in a just regular theater. I don't think it was a Cineplex, it was a Toronto Uptown. Soon after it came out, it's the last time I remember just spontaneous, raucous applause after a film of that type. Maybe they do that at Marvel films, I don't know. But the crowd was just, and it was packed. This was sort of a venerable Toronto first run theater, and the place just went crazy. And I totally understood. I felt like cheering myself. Um, and the twists and turns since then. I thought a good place for me to begin would be, and I got to preface it by saying it's John Simon, who I know can be really, I is he even still alive? I'm not sure. I think he died.
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, who could certainly be very nasty. I think if he were had a regular post today. Unless he changed, I think he'd hold it for about 2 weeks. He could be particularly nasty about female actresses and their appearance. But he was one of the leading critics of the 60s and 70s, along with Cale and Saris and Stanley Kaufman. And I want to read something. He just hated Godard. So I'll preface it by saying, I find Godard very interesting and have come to really love some of his films. Early on, I found him frustrating. So his target here, I don't share. But in him, he was so exasperated by the praise for Godard. He just hated Godard. He wrote in his book, Private Screenings, he's got a long essay called Godard and the Godardians. And it starts by him trying to find, and this is, I think about this now, I think, are the seeds of destruction for everything I hate about Wes Anderson, are they there? Or is there something there in Rushmore that I should have been more aware of? Because I just love Rushmore. And he goes back to Breathless, which is a film, he says he liked it. He saw good things in it. But he went back to, he said, there's a moment where everything, he calls it the moment of disaster in Breathless, that points towards everything that he came to loathe about Godard. And for him, it was this scene in Breathless where Belmondo and Seabird, they go to the movies. It's a generic Western. I think maybe Godard filmed his own thing, or I don't know. But then over top in the soundtrack, suddenly you're hearing lines from the poet Apollinaire, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and that just drove Simon crazy. and then he wrote, this is the quote that applies to me for Wes Anderson. It is in this direction that Godard is proceeding. One watched with horror the gratuitous but arrogant devices multiply, the idea being to jolt us, if possible, continuously. And that's how I see Wes Anderson, culminating in the Phoenician scheme, which I just loathed. And I know I tried to go into it with an open mind. But even before I saw it, I was posting in the ILX thread about movies you're going to avoid that I was going to hate watch it. Once I knew you and I were going to do a Zoom, I said, okay, try to be open-minded. But within a minute, it's like everything I hate about Anderson now, just flooding back at me. So I guess I'm asking for you to help me connect Rushmore to the Phoenician scheme. What happened? Is it still the same filmmaker? Am I missing something? Help me out.
I think that obviously you can see things in Rushmore, including I think that's where he first used Helvetica, right? I mean, like some of his stylistic things are there. What I think happens to him, and I think I have a higher tolerance for Wes Anderson than a lot of people do. Like I basically like him, but I rarely love him. And that's kind of how I felt with this movie. Although I will say that the first 15 minutes or so of this movie, I was I was just kind of rolling my eyes, and I to some degree came around on it, but we can talk about that. But yeah, I think that what's there is like the formalism. Like he's very interested, and I think in Rushmore it took the form of he wanted to convey sort of he had gone to a boarding school or a private school, a day school maybe himself, but I don't think he's trying to give you like a sense of what it was actually like to go to one of these schools. He was conveying sort of like a whole set of tropes and ideas around what these prep schools are like. And so I think there was like that degree of abstraction was already there. Like he wasn't presenting you with a real place. He was presenting you with a bit of a playhouse built on, various cultural ideas. But what I think happened to him over time is that the formalism just came so much to the fore that the movies became, it's like a painting that becomes more about the frame, that's kind of, and so I think the frame was always there. It just kind of moved increasingly into the foreground.
Yeah, actually, I've got 3 quotes here from You Got a Chapter in Post Pop Cinema on Wes Anderson. So I read the preface, which is about Anderson in general, and then I read the Rushmore entries. Very good.
Thanks.
And I've written a lot about Anderson too. So let me do some personal plugging here. I've got a piece in here. My initial encounter with Rushmore, which I loved, it's called "So Sad About Max," taken from the Who song. And actually, and there's two long pieces on pop music and movies here that he is front and center in, along with Paul Thomas Anderson. And even though I'd written, by the time I did my movie music book, I'd written so much about Anderson that I didn't include him in this. I have him in the clipography. My single favorite use of music by him is still, and you mentioned in your essay, The Creations, Making Time, which I'd never heard when I saw Rushmore. I thought it was a Who song. I didn't know. And over this incredible montage of Max's extracurricular activities, I still get a chill up my spine if I watch that. It's unbelievable. So we've both written about him a lot. So let me pull some quotes and we'll apply them. I know so far we've been very general because, and I told Jesse before we started talking, I'm sitting there watching the Phoenician scheme, and I know I'm not going to remember specifics because I'm just sitting there like, what is, and that's the thing you talk about. It's all about the frame now. Rushmore, for all of its definite artifice and all those signatures are there, it still felt very real to me.
Mm-hmm.
It felt very much a coming of age film. Quirky guy for sure. Not like a conventional coming of age film. And I also saw a connection to it, and it's kind of something I'm working on now and trying to sort out my mind, to a certain kind of late 60s film. I finally figured out, to me, his use of pop music and Sofia Coppola's use of pop music was so different than Scorsese and Tarantino. And the reason is I think they find their roots in a certain kind of late 60s film that I've started to think of as sunshine cinema, like the Goodbye Columbus and the Sterile Cuckoo and the Heartbreak Kid. I think you point out in your essay that he takes a lot of the stuff that Tarantino still, and Paul Thomas Anderson doing their Scorsese thing. He just takes it for granted. He wants to go somewhere else.
Right.
And I think that's where he tries to go. So anyway, so as I'm watching it, I'm not going to be too good on details, but here's the first thing I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you to connect Benicio del Toro's character in the Phoenician scheme. Here's what you wrote about Anderson in general. And I'm going to quote it. So it's not that long. He likes artists and explorers and scientists, entrepreneurs and oddballs, people whose talents set them apart. He's interested in people who do things, but also in some ways hold them back. His characters are misfits whose emotional maturity lags behind their accomplishments and whose inflated sense of their own importance is consistently challenged by the difficulties of interacting with human beings. That's certainly Max. Nevertheless, it is important to Anderson for his flawed heroes to triumph somehow over whatever adversaries they confront. Those adversaries often include their own pride and petulant insecurity just makes the triumph seem more significant. The greatest achievement for a character in a Wes Anderson movie is simply to grow up. Perfect description of Max. Is he still there with Corda, Benicio del Toro's Corda?
Yeah, very much. I think so. And, Porta is also the latest in this like long line of Anderson, bad father figures who, and by bad, I mean, that takes various forms, but it always takes the form of a sort of fundamental emotional immaturity. These guys are all, even Corda, who is very successful, at least at the start of the movie, he's this, world domineering tycoon. But he still clearly operates in this, almost childlike denial of the world around him, even though he's the one, exercising his will on the world. And so, yeah, I think that the movie, like it's another Wes Anderson story of and obviously Gene Hackman's character in the Royal Tenenbaums is this. Bill Murray's character in Rushmore is this. Bill Murray again in Darjeeling Limited. Like these kind of and so like how those connect to Max, I think, is that's who, if Max doesn't have the revelations that I think you can kind of read into the end of Rushmore, that Max has actually had come to some greater level of like self-awareness and less insecurity and less defensiveness toward the world. Like you get some sense that, okay, maybe this kid's going to be okay. But I think that these flawed sort of paternal figures are where that goes if it doesn't get dealt with in adolescence, you know.
Yeah,
And yeah,
because
he is returning to that type over and over.
yeah, I do think about that every time I see an Anderson film. Is this Max, 20, 30, 40 years down the road? Um, okay, so we do see a connection there. I think you explained that well. Now, let's talk a little bit. By the way, just again, I keep going back to my overall feelings on Anderson. For me, after Rushmore, I like Tenenbaums a lot. It's still, to me, grounded in something I understand, a world I understand. Then he kind of veers. The next couple of films, I didn't love them, but they were okay. They still kept me interested in Wes Anderson. I'm talking about The Life Aquatic and Darjeeling Limited. I think those were the next two. I haven't seen Fantastic Mr. Fox, where everything takes a right turn for me or a left turn, goes south, would be Grand Budapest Hotel, which I wanted to watch in its entirety before doing this. So I got caught up in other stuff. I'm halfway through it, rewatching on Prime. I'm not hating it quite as much as I did the first time, but I'm still, again, it's the artifice is now front and center. So let me take three very short quotes from your Anderson essay here, and they all deal with the same thing, the visual part of Anderson. First one, as a visual stylist, Anderson has gotten progressively more inventive with each film. And by the way, your essay ends with Zizou and Darjeeling Limited.
Right. Those were the most recent movies at the
Yeah,
time.
so he hadn't yet done Fantastic Mr. Fox, I guess. Um, Gets progressively more inventive with each film to the extent that some critics faulted Life Aquatic for neglecting character and plot in favor of elaborately staged set pieces, which now is my overriding complaint now. And then you compare him to Terry Gilliam, but where Gilliam often neglects to populate his ornate sound stages with actual characters, Anderson fills up his movies with complicated neurotic personalities. I'm on the first half of that sentence.
Yeah.
He fills them up with, ornate sound stages. And then finally, a quote from Owen Wilson that, sorry, go away, that you work into your chapter. As Owen Wilson says in an interview included on the Life Aquatic DVD, it's a world that Wes creates, slightly artificial, slightly, but I think within that world, the emotions and feelings are very real. For me, Rushmore, 100%. Tenenbaums, 98%. And by the time we get to the Phoenician scheme, we're down to about 10 or 5%. Where is the feeling? What am I missing?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is, like there are different levels of Anderson enthusiasm, but I do think there are a lot of people who like him or can like him, but are put off by the artifice and by one thing that's happened, and this is really true in the Phoenician scheme. Like look at the styles of performance that he is getting now, and I actually like the performances in the Phoenician scheme.
You really singled out, I think, in your Facebook post or maybe on ILX, but you thought Benicio del Toro was.
Yeah, I thought that he actually did something interesting with that character. And I also like him as an actor. And it was kind of fun just to watch it because he doesn't get a lot of lead roles, you know.
He
So
kind of disappeared from me. I thought he was so
yeah.
interesting around the time of Usual Suspects, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then he was sort of in supporting roles in a bunch of things. And
Yeah.
but even saying that I liked some of the performances, they're very constricted, and you look at like I think what makes Rushmore and Tenenbaums in particular, those two movies really work is that you have all of the kind of conceptual trickery going on, but it does not hem in its characters. The characters in those movies are really messy. They're they're prone to sort of emotional outbursts. And I think that tension makes those movies feel, um, I mean, really unique. That is, he does a particular set of things there where he's giving you this very elaborate kind of set, but then letting these people just kind of run loose through it and kind of trash the place to a degree, you know?
I got to just to underscore that. I have to sing about Gene Hackman's performance in
Yeah.
these films. You know, and I was weird to read about how I guess he had some tension on the set, or he didn't like, there were things he didn't like about it. But Anderson very smartly let Gene Hackman, who's a brilliant comedian, he is just so amazing in that. He's got
Yeah.
that twinkle in his eye, and the me and Julio scene, exactly what you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
He tells those kids, you got to get out there, you got to mix it up. That scene is unbelievable. And that's where the life is and the characters. And that to me is gone now. I guess I obviously Del Toro is having a good time. I won't argue that. And,
It was him and the interplay between him and Mia Threppleton, I
I
think
didn't
is
get
saying
her.
that right. Well, and I mean, she's very, talk about giving these almost robotic line
Oh,
reading.
very dead. Yeah.
But I did actually like, I warmed up to them over the course of the movie. I will say that since seeing the movie, I have found myself quoting one of Del Toro's lines from the movie a lot, which I don't remember doing much with other recent Wes Anderson movies. Which is just to say that like I liked this one more than I liked the last two. I had a lot of issues with the French Dispatch. There were parts of Asteroid City that I thought worked well, and then again, Asteroid City, it had too many frames.
Mm.
It was like a show within a. It was too conceptual and too remote for me. So this one I enjoyed. This one was more of a lark, I
What's
thought.
the line you quote, by the way?
Oh, just the way that he's cut whenever anything threatening happens, he just says, "Myself, I feel very safe," and I just like his delivery of it is very good.
I
Myself,
still,
very safe.
I still quote Max, the OR scrubs. Oh, are they from Rushmore?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's great.
Oh, that kills me. Yeah, I don't think I'd ever seen her before. Anything, I don't think. And
She's
it was,
apparently she's a Kate Winslet daughter.
oh, yeah, maybe I read that.
I
Yeah.
think she's been in some things, but I don't remember seeing her in other
And
things.
Michael Cera, I asked on ILX, and somebody pointed me to somebody who really hated this film, and someone did a writer. I turned out to have a book by him. He hated the film, but he liked Michael Cera, and Michael Cera kind of drove me up the wall. So, I don't know. Um, and what are there any other performances we should mention? People turn up. Even watching Grand Budapest Hotel right now, it's wow, I completely forgotten Harvey Keitel turns up.
Oh, I know. He gets so many. Yeah, that was one thing that was really well, and it's this movie in particular lends itself to this sort of like giant cast because it's set up as this quest where he has to go and visit all of these different people in different places. But yeah, you turn around and Scarlett Johansson's there, and then Tom Hanks,
He has like four
Cranston
lines.
are there,
Yeah.
and
And
just
I missed that was Bill Murray. I totally
yeah,
missed
yeah, right. Bill Murray is God. Yeah, and all the okay. So one thing I did not particularly care for, especially in this movie, was doing the whole sort of like heavenly trial that he seems to be on,
it.
which I read somewhere he said that was a Powell Pressburger nod, and it felt like a Powell Pressburger nod, but kind of a pointless one. I mean, I like Powell Pressburger too, but I didn't feel like it.
Colonel Blimp, where they do that, life and death.
Huh?
Is that no a life matter of life and death, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and also you mentioned the famous story in your chapter about Wes Anderson soliciting Pauline Kael's opinion. He gets a screen or two, or he takes her to the movies or something, actually get together. And that great quote of Kael's comes out of it. And I think you're right. I think she was trying to be polite. I suspect she just
You
hated it.
probably did not like the movie.
The quote is, I genuinely don't know what to make of this movie. And something prefaced by, I don't know what you have here, young man, or something
Yeah.
like that. I love that quote. And to me, that is applies to Rushmore in the best possible way. And when you get to these later films, for me, applies to them in the worst possible way. I don't know. I have no idea what to make of the Phoenician scheme. I don't know. I've got an idea I'll mention in a minute. I don't know what connection it has to the world or anything that I experienced in my life where so I don't know what to make of it. And I mean it in the worst possible sense.
Well,
Um,
one of my Facebook friends, when I posted about it, uh, who I don't know well enough to really know what his overall movie taste or anything else is. But you know, I would characterize like he probably is kind of like a normie moviegoer, let's say. And he said, "Oh, I just love his quirky humor." And so I think there are, you know, there's a universe of people out there who just kind of think of Wes Anderson as this kind of funny guy who shows up and has these, you know, sort of funny, inventive looking movies. And, you know, to his credit, like you do not mistake him for anybody else. Like he is a one man band of making Wes Anderson movies. And
yeah,
so there are people who are just kind of tickled by like the novelty of the presentation of it.
I was thinking. I mean, I guess there are points of affinity with maybe a Spike Jones or Charlie Kaufman or somebody. But yeah, his style is unmistakable. And I mean, one thing, and I found this to be kind of a red flag, where there was a commercial that, or I see parodies of Wes Anderson, you know,
Yeah.
things that are, and I'm just saying, if he's that easy to imitate, is that a good thing? I mean, they're like perfect. Um, yeah, so I Kale had trouble with Rushmore. I that's the thing. I want somebody. That's what I was looking for. I want somebody to do like a Kale. Film critics very rarely just go overboard in their hatred in anymore,
Yeah.
and it can be very boring. I know the critics do that. I don't write film like that, but I would like to read like a vintage Kale or Simon. Just good job on this film.
Yeah, the closest that I see to that, I have a good friend who is an extremely knowledgeable, serious movie guy who has written a lot about movies over the years. He doesn't particularly anymore, I don't think, but and somebody whose taste I, you know, more often share than don't, and always value his perspective. But and I don't think he's probably seen a Wes Anderson movie in about 15 years. But every time there's a new trailer, he makes a point of posting it and just kind of groaning and saying, "Really, are we still doing it?"
No,
So
I know the trailer.
if I can get him to write a really good takedown of why he hates Wes Anderson, I think that would be what we're looking for.
Make sure you send that to me. Yeah, the trailers are. His trailer certainly captures films because the last three or four, as soon as I've seen the trailer, it's like, oh no, not again. Um, so to be a little more specific about the film, and what's his first name? Corda, Benicio.
Jaja.
Zsa Zsa Corda. Now, this is something I'm very prone to doing, and I do it so often that I think, yeah, I'm reaching half the time. But is he supposed to evoke in any way, shape, or form Trump? Was that
So
just
yeah, I
me?
think that's like the only politically interesting things about the movie, I think, are the ways that it makes you wonder if it has a political point, but I don't think it does. And
Okay.
that's I thought it's an interesting thing about Wes Anderson, and I guess also about the way we all perceive him at this point, um, that he has made a sort of basically apolitical film about this world dominating tycoon striding across, you know, the Middle East in the sort of like post World War II, end of the colonial era, doing these extremely exploitive things. Um, but that's not what the movie's about. It's like he's just kind of taken this type of character, uh, I think because it allows him to once again play with the, you know, okay, the man child father figure, except he's, you know, a world dominating tycoon. And to be honest, like I saw this within a few weeks of seeing Mountainhead, you know, the Jesse Armstrong satire about the tech bro billionaires
I don't
in
know.
their mountain fortress. It says, you know, it's basically like an Elon Musk satire, more or less, by the guy who made Succession. Um, and that was so on the nose and really didn't add anything interesting to anything you would think about those characters, that in a way I was glad that the Corda character was not that. Like, I don't think he's supposed to be anybody in particular. And also, you know, everybody says right at the beginning of the movie that he's evil. His own daughter spends the whole movie telling him he's evil. And so it's not like there's any grand revelations about it. Like, all of it has to do more with, his own kind of coming to terms with his mortality, I think, is the basic thrust of it.
I just thought of Trump. He prides himself on being this brilliant negotiator, the father daughter, the evil part, and he has that kind of Colonel Kurtz thing where he just, he'll stride through a minefield and bombs will go off all around him and he'll emerge unscathed. I also thought the name Korda was kind of interesting. I immediately thought of Alexander Korda, the British film producer, and I again, because I just lost particulars. I don't know why, but the beginning of the film, something about the setup reminded me of Citizen Kane. A lot of films do sort of a Kane opening, and there was something about that made me think, oh, that's Citizen Kane. So I don't know. I think you're right, though. I think he just kind of plays with politics in just the most incidental way. And if he has any kind of a political grounding, I wouldn't have a clue what it is. So we've got about 7 or 8 minutes left. Well, what do you think? I feel a little ungenerous, as someone who is the kind of film goer who the films that I used to go to are generally not found in first run theaters anymore, which the whole industry has changed and they've been given over to Marvel films and just films that are going in Disney and whatever. I should be grateful that Wes Anderson still gets his films. I saw it at a Cineplex. It's sort of open here in a Cineplex, but it's also open in one of the rep theaters. Is that, what allows him to do that? What is his audience? Is he still someone? Is he a refuge from those films? Or I'm just trying to figure out
I
how he
do think
keeps.
that there's like I think he fills a little bit the slot that Woody Allen used to, in a way.
That makes sense to me.
They're not super challenging movies, but they are, kind of inventive, and often, but not always, funny. It's like, it does feel like you're getting something different than the 16 sequels that are otherwise at the Cineplex, but not in a way that is going to make anybody uncomfortable. So I think, he definitely has a niche. Asteroid City was a hit, like, it made money.
Wow.
So he does connect at sort of a, I don't know, middle brow, college educated audience level.
And clearly, again, the Woody Allen comparison, name actors and actresses, they're just dying to work
Yeah,
with. Like his casts are amazing. And I guessing they do it for less money than they normally would get.
presumably.
Scarlett Johansson gets millions and millions for a Marvel film, but she probably works at something small percentage of that. That's impressive. Yeah, I wonder, for someone like me, will he ever make another Rushmore? Is he just going to continue making these films that baffle me and I don't get anything out of them? And I wonder how long I'm going to keep going to them.
Yeah, right.
There's a lot of goodwill left over from me from Rushmore.
Well, I think I'm destined to continue seeing them for some time to come, because he's an extremely popular filmmaker in my household. My wife's a big fan, and both of my kids are too, which I think is interesting, because I don't think the reference points in most of his movies connect with them particularly at all. They just like his vibe.
How old would your kids be?
So they're now 17 and 20, but I think we have seen every Anderson movie together since I honestly can't remember the first one we saw in the theater. Grand Budapest Hotel might have been the first one we saw in the theater together. But yeah, they love him.
Did they
They
go? Did you take them back to Rushmore and Royal Tenenbaums?
Oh yeah, yeah. We've watched Rushmore, Tenenbaums. We haven't quite hit on all of them. I don't think we ever did The Life Aquatic,
Okay,
uh, but they're big, Fantastic Mr. Fox fans.
great. And the last thing I'll mention, since we do both take an interest, and this is another disappointment for me, that he has basically, at least in this film, and what was the one before this one? Was it New York or Paris Dispatch? Or
Asteroids.
he seems to have basically abandoned pop music, which Rushmore and Royal Tenenbaums, and even Steve Zissou, which had all the Bowie stuff, and
Hmm.
the Bowie doesn't seem to be an interest of his anymore. Or
Yeah, that is interesting, and I still all the time hear songs that I think, oh, this would be great in a Wes Anderson movie. So yeah, I guess his taste just evolved away.
yeah, I wonder if he would be. He must get approached by Netflix and Prime to do a TV series all the time. I wonder if he'll ever um, go down that road.
Yeah, well, he did those couple of the short roll doll films. I think that was with one of the streaming services. Uh,
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
yeah, you could definitely see him doing like an anthology series or something,
Yeah, something like that. Okay, well, thank you very much, Jesse. That was
Absolutely.
good. I'm glad. I'm actually, I wanted to defer to you, and you could say some nice things about the film. Will you see it a
To
second
be
time?
clear, I did. I mean, the one thing I said when I posted about it on Facebook was like, I would not recommend this be anybody's first or second Wes Anderson movie. So if you're somebody who's already seen at least two Wes Anderson movies, you know whether you want to see another one.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's I more or less enjoyed it, but it's very middle of the pack, I think.
Okay, true enough. Great. Okay, thanks to Jesse. We'll get this with Scott Woods' help. We'll get this up and posted in 2 or 3 weeks, hopefully 4 weeks. And good luck with the podcast, and
All right, thank you.
hope to do another one of these at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks
Enjoyed
again.
it.
Take care.
Yep, you too.